Let's ponder the question, why do so many organizations struggle to execute even the most basic of business strategies? According to research highlighted by my friends at the Project Management Institute, more than 60% of corporate boards now consider strategy execution as their top strategic oversight priority. Meanwhile, while companies with weak execution lose more than 40% of their strategy's potential value. On the contrary, research highlighted by the Harvard Business School says that only about 10% of executives successfully implement their strategic initiatives and objectives every year. In this episode, I sit down with my friend Dre Baldwin. He's a keynote speaker, former professional basketball player, and the founder of Work on Your Game Incorporated, to explore why execution and not strategy is the real differentiator between success and failure. Baldwin is known for his discipline, confidence, mental toughness, and personal initiative. He built a global brand surrounded by the concept of helping organizations and professionals eliminate the inconsistencies and bottlenecks which allow you to perform at a high level. He's known for developing his system known as Work on Your Game Framework and the Execution Reliability Index. He teaches leaders how to close the gap between ideas and implementation by creating systems which promote accountability, structure, and repeatable results. Dre's story is just as compelling as his message from being overlooked. As a high school basketball player and building a 9-year professional basketball career, becoming an author of more than 35 books, and becoming a globally recognized speaker. He's turned resilience into a blueprint for high performance. His content has been consumed more than 103 million times. Meanwhile, his daily masterclass has generated over 7.3 million downloads. Throughout our conversation, Dre shares practical insights on why most organizations don't have a strategy problem, they have an execution problem, how leaders can create systems that create consistency under pressure, the mindset shifts needed for both discipline and accountability, and finally, why confidence is built through action and not motivation. He also has some thoughts on how elite performers can maintain mental toughness in high-stakes environments and why and what organizations can do to align leadership vision with day-to-day execution. And to join me this week to tell me more, I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Dre, if you're ready, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program, my friend, and I'm super excited to learn how you turned your own journey of perseverance into a business strategy of your own execution. My friend, it's great to see you and happy Thursday to you.
Thank you. Same to you.
Absolutely, my friend. Now, Dre, I know that you say that most executives don't have a strategy problem. They've got an execution problem. So I'm wondering, when you work with executives and organizational leaders, how do you make them understand the difference between a strategy and execution problem, my friend?
Well, good question. So the strategy problem, first of all, let's just define what these things mean. Strategy is a plan of action. This is what we're going to do, and the purpose of this plan is to achieve this desired outcome. That's what a strategy is. If we do this, we get this. Execution, on the other hand, is the actual doing part. That's the part of actually implementing the strategy and making it work. Because people can have access to a strategy but still not implement properly, the same way somebody can buy a book but not read it. So the strategy problem versus execution problem is many companies think that when they're not getting the results that they want, that there's something wrong with their plan. So maybe we need to change our system. Maybe we need to change the compensation plan. Maybe we need to change the entire process of how things work, and maybe that will solve the results problem. That's often not the issue. The issue is usually, Kevin, that people are not executing properly. They're not sticking to the system the way it's supposed to be stuck to. And that if that got fixed, then the strategy that's already in place will, quote unquote, work and produce the right result. The issue for organizations and leaders is that they don't have anything in place to enforce the proper execution of the strategy. And that's the reason why it looks like the strategy is not working, when the strategy is perfectly fine if everybody executed it properly. But until they can measure the execution, the compliance rate of execution of the strategy, then they can't say that the strategy doesn't work, because nobody's following it fully well enough for you to say, okay, we did this the right way, here's the result. They haven't done that yet, so they can't say the strategy doesn't work. But often that's the first thing companies default to.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dre, just because I'm personally interested, I'm gonna ask you, what do you think? Organizations have a emotional connection problem, and what I mean by that is a compassionate connection problem in terms of their ability to be relatable from an organizational leadership perspective to the people that they're in charge of leading. Because I firmly believe that inside every organization, your people are your best asset. So I'm wondering your thoughts on whether you think organizational leaders have a connection, an emotional sort of feeling problem when it comes to authentically connecting with their employees. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
I think you're 100% right. And how it connects directly to the first question that you asked me when it comes to execution, because in order to get people to execute, or even to buy into the system in the first place and then execute, you have to have people wanting to do what you need them to do as the leader. In order to get people to want to do something that you need them to do, they need to feel like you have their best interests at heart. And what a lot of leaders do is that they carry themselves and they communicate like bosses, which is not the same as a leader. Even though they may be the boss, being a boss and being a leader are two different things. A boss is a person who can tell you what to do and you have to do it because of the position that they hold within the hierarchy relative to you, i.e. they write the checks, they can fire you. That's a boss. A leader, on the other hand, is a person who they ask you or want you to do something and you do it because you want to serve and work with that leader. They can get you to do something even when you don't necessarily have to, or go above and beyond what is required of you because of your connection to that person. And the leader's job is to create that connection. And the way that they do that, what I suggest all leaders do, first thing is you got to find out what the people on your team actually want. Like, why are they there? Some people are there for the money. Some people are there for the status. Some people want to move up. Some people are there for the connection. Some people want to be led. Some people want to be taught. Different people have different reasons why they are in the same place. And a leader's job is to find out what that reason is. And then you can frame your requests, demands, whatever you want to call it, around that. And that's the way that you can get people to buy in. And just understand, as a leader, not everybody is there for the exact same reason. And your job is to find out what that reason is and utilize that reason in the relationships you build with the people on your team.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dre, I'm also curious to ask you about organizational culture and forming a thriving organizational culture where people are valued in the sense of innovation. You know, buddy, I was born with cerebral palsy, and I found out at the age of 9 that I would never be able to walk without assistance because of the severity of my disability. And I talk to organizational leaders about the importance of embracing inclusion and diversity as a competitive advantage rather than looking at it as a liability. So I'm curious to ask you about organizational culture, the importance of perseverance, and how inclusion fits into that equation. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Well, first of all, on the perseverance level, that's required for anybody who's going to be successful because no matter how clean your strategy, how talented your team, there are going to come times in the process when things are not working the way that you want them to work. Everybody eventually hits that wall, or over here we call it the third day, that situation where everything is not all fun and games, is not all easy and smooth, and you have to work your way through that in order to stay in the professional position that you're in as a company, an organization, or as an individual. And so perseverance is required for anybody to be successful in anything they do, whether we're talking an individual person or a team. As far as the inclusion part goes, I am okay with inclusion with an asterisk. Here's the asterisk that I put on inclusion because I come from a background, Kevin, I think you know, I come from a background as an athlete. And in the sports world, it is by definition exclusive. It is not inclusive, it's exclusive. What makes it exclusive is that not everybody can be on the team. And how do you get on the team? You get on the team because you are a performer for whom your presence makes the team better. So I am good with the concept of inclusion if it means, hey, we're looking at everybody. At the same time, we are looking at whoever can give us the best opportunity to be the best performing organization that we can be. In other words, we're not going to exclude people for reasons other than you are not able to help this team win. If we're excluding you for any reason other than that, that's not a good idea because you're shutting yourself off from possible talent who can help the team. Anybody who can help the team can be on the team. But if you're not helping the team, we're not going to bring people in just to say that we brought them in. They have to be able to perform because this is a performance and results based business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to touch on your personal journey because, as you know, buddy, you were a Division III college athlete, and you turned that into a 9-year professional career playing basketball, rather, overseas. And I'm curious, what did that experience taught you about the real need for resilience and forming your own sense of personal identity? Tell me more, buddy.
Oh, sure. So the resilience part, easy, because I only played 1 year in high school. I walked on to play Division III in college, and then nobody was checking for me to play pro. I had to sell myself and market myself to even get my chance to play in the pros. So I needed resilience at all three levels. And even once I got to the pros, I still had to keep grinding or hustling in order to keep the opportunities coming year after year for the time that I was playing. So the resilience was built into the path for me, given where I came from and where I was trying to go and what I ended up doing. So the resilience was a big part. The other thing you mentioned is about identity. And for me, at the start, Kevin, the identity was just I'm a basketball player and I believe I'm good enough to play pro. And each level, I had to keep proving that. Even once I became pro, I had to keep proving it in order to remain pro. As far as the identity overall, what it evolved into was, okay, I'm a person who sticks to things. I'm a person who can keep going when it gets hard. I'm a person who knows how to sell, market, and promote myself. I'm a person who can make something happen out of nothing. I'm a person who, when I say that I'm going to do something, once I figure out what will make it work, I am willing to do it long enough in order to make it work and to build that resume over time. So all of those identity pieces came during the process, but it wasn't something that I had at the start of the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dre, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this because our friends at the Harvard Business School, they released research last year that showed when they interviewed over 400,000 Ivy League athletes who eventually went on to become high-level executives, or they have sort of a background in high-level jobs after playing sports. So I'm curious, what do you think athletes would make good executives, and what you make of so many high-level executives coming from a background in sports, buddy. What are your thoughts there?
That's an interesting stat. I didn't know about that stat. But one thing I do know from my background, especially in sales and being an entrepreneur, is that a lot of times sales organizations look for former athletes coming out of college. And the reason why is the same reason why, even when I stopped playing, a lot of organizations wanted to bring me in as a consultant, trainer, or speaker because of my background in sports, because there are certain aspects of being an athlete that are directly related to operating in business. Number one is athletes are competitive. We understand the concept of going out and competing, and sometimes you miss a shot, sometimes you make a shot, but the overall goal is to win the game. So athletes understand working with targets. Number two, athletes work with different types of leaders. There are leaders who will yell at you. There are teammates who will check you. There are opponents who are going to hold you accountable in your performance. And organizations want people like that because they come in already toughened up with thick skin and ready to roll with the punches, so to speak. Number three, athletes know how to work within teams, because when you play a team sport like football, basketball, soccer, baseball, hockey, you're dealing with a lot of different personalities from different walks of life, from different areas of the world, different backgrounds. But you all have one thing in common, is that we're members of this team and we're trying to achieve this goal. So it's easier for athletes to adapt when they go into the professional non-sports world, adapt to working with teams because they're used to dealing with different types of people as long as everybody is aligned on the goal. Another thing, athletes have to perform. In athletics, every time you have a game, there's a bunch of people watching you work. Most people, when they're at work, they don't have an audience of people watching them at their job. So athletes are used to being evaluated. They're used to being critiqued. They're used to having people watch them and talk about them when they perform, and they will take the feedback based on with respect to the scoreboard, what the scoreboard says, which leads to the next thing. Athletes knows that their performance is being measured by the scoreboard, which is objective. It is impartial. It has no personal feelings about you. It just tells you, here's the score. Here's how you did. We won the game. We lost the game. It is black and white, and athletes can take that. And the last one I'll tell you is that athletes are used to showing up consistently and doing the job. Because when you're an athlete playing a sport in college, not only are you taking a full course load, but you also have basically a second job playing that sport. So you have to manage your time. You have to manage your schedule. You got to manage your energy, your relationships, and you have to show up every single day, not only in the classroom, but also on the field, court, or at the pool, and do that training even when you don't feel like it, even when you didn't sleep well, even when your team lost the last game, you got a headache, your back hurts, you got a test in class tomorrow, you still have to show up and do that job. So these are all things all traits and skills that professional organizations want in their teams. So when they recruit an athlete, or they get someone who happened to have been an athlete, that person comes with all of these skills and traits already built in.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Dre, I'm curious to ask you about today's athletic culture and the whole idea of load management and social media and the societal pressures of performing as an athlete today. And how do you think the modern definition of success for athletes has evolved over the years? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Well, I'm an absolutist when it comes to this kind of thing. Very pragmatic, Kevin. And success in sports means winning the game, period. You win enough. The game is decided by the scoreboard. You win on the scoreboard. You win enough games, you make it to the postseason, whether that's the tournament or the playoffs, and you win enough games in the playoffs, you win the championship. So that is what success means, winning the game. What happens with a lot of athletes these days, and you are 100% correct, is that the definitions have been shifted, and that a lot of athletes nowadays seem to focus on their individual performance. Well, I have these stats. I had this many points, then that is looked at as a success. That is not a success. The purpose of scoring points and playing sports is as a means to the ends of winning the game. So if you score a bunch of points and your team did not win, that is not a success. You can say, hey, I scored a bunch of points. I can build on that. But ultimately, the outcome is about winning the game. If you did not win the game, the mission was not completed.
Yeah, and I want to talk to you about transformational moments in your life. I know for you in 2005, you were creating content on this newly fangled thing called YouTube, and people were beginning to reach out to you, as you said, because they were interested in your message and sort of the mission of your message, my friend. So take me back to 2005 and how that was a transformative part of your life, my friend.
Sure. So it was actually a several year window here. So in 2005 is where it started. So that was the year where I first started playing professional basketball as well. And I took that footage, some footage I had from going to an exposure camp, which is basically like a job fair for athletes. And I uploaded that footage, which I actually had transferred off of a VHS tape. Some of your audience may remember those. Had that transferred onto a data CD, and that's what I uploaded to YouTube. Now, between 2005 and 2009, I'm playing basketball professionally. I'm traveling the world playing, and I would post videos to YouTube sporadically because I saw there was an audience of people who wanted to learn, and they saw me as a possible source of knowledge and information. So I did it sporadically, but not consistently. It was around that 2009 time that Google purchased YouTube, and then they said, well, you can make money. The more videos you post and the more people who watch your videos, the more money you can make. So I started publishing more consistently. Also, I started selling programs, and I was using my videos as the marketing tool to get people to buy the programs. That was another incentive I had to publish consistently. And because now I'm selling these programs, I was making money off the court for the first time in my, really the first time in my life. I was making money off the court. So all of those things happened all at the same time. That was really the pivotal moment. Probably if we shifted a few years forward from when you asked about 2009, 2010. That's when things really started to shift for me, and I started to think more like an entrepreneur, brand builder, business owner, because that was going to be the next chapter of my career after basketball. I kept playing until 2015, but I knew what was coming next by 2009.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, I'm wondering your thoughts on the whole concept of personal accountability and professional accountability, because no matter how talented you are, your athletic future will come to an end. So I'm curious about your thoughts on the importance of both personal and professional accountability, my friend.
Sure. So accountability, if we break that down, it comes back to the word account. And what does an accountant do? An accountant is the person who counts all the money. Right? They make sure every dollar that came in is there and every dollar that went out is accounted for. And if a dollar is missing, the accountant doesn't stop working it. They don't close the books until that dollar is found. So accountability is about, here's what the expectation was. Here's what the performance was. Is there any deviation between the expectation and the performance? And if so, let's explain why this gap exists. And also let's make sure this gap no longer exists the next time we have to run through the execution. So that's what accountability is about. On a personal level, anyone who is going to be a leader and hold others accountable, you must first close all your individual accountability gaps. Because if you have accountability gaps, then you are unqualified to hold others accountable. On the organizational level, this is talking about execution and execution reliability, which is one of the things that we work with organizations on. That is all about making sure that everyone in the organization is executing according to the clearly documented plan and or process. If everyone's executing according to the process, then the organizational accountability is where it needs to be. The execution is hitting on all cylinders, let's say 100% level. If you're only doing half of what's supposed to be executed, then it's at 50%. So, and when you can measure it and you can put a number to it, now you know what to fix, you know how much it needs to be fixed, and you can see how much is affecting the bottom line of either for yourself or the bottom line of the organization. So that's what accountability means for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about the company and brand you've built, my friend. You call on your work on your game philosophy, which I know is centered around four key principles, my friend. So tell me about the work on your game method and the principles that it's centered around, my friend.
Sure. So work on your game started when I was back in the basketball days, that 2009-10 period. It started with specific mindset focus on discipline, confidence, discipline of showing up consistently, confidence to put yourself out there, mental toughness to keep going even when things didn't look good, and the initiative to make things happen. That became what we now call the mindset piece, which is pillar number one. It's still the baseline pillar of everything that I do. The second pillar became the strategy, which we talked about a lot here today. That's a plan of action. What exactly are we going to do? How are we going to do it? Third pillar became the system. System is about how do we execute a strategy that produces a specific outcome over and over and over again with very little variation between executions. And then that last point is the execution. How do we make sure we are executing consistently the way that we're supposed to so that the targets are being hit? And if and when we are not executing, we can identify where that failure in execution is happening so that we can fix it.
Yeah, and Dre, I'm also curious to ask you about the whole concept of being internally motivated and, creating your own level of expectations, and how do you think it's related to something that you created called the Execution Reliability Index, my friend? So tell me about the index and your thoughts on the whole idea of, internal motivation and finding your own path forward, because I think if you don't have your own level of expectations, it's hard to raise to the level of anybody else. And I'm curious to get your answer there, my friend.
Sure. So internal motivation is a nice to have, but it is not a requirement for professional execution, because motivation comes and goes. Motivation is fickle. Motivation shows up when it wants to, and if it does not want to, it does not show up. So you can't build a career around motivation of any type simply because motivation is unreliable. But you can build a career around discipline, because discipline is very consistent, and discipline is a byproduct of structure. It's not a personality trait. It's a byproduct of following structure. So when it comes to execution reliability, it's all about making sure that the structure is being followed consistently. And that leads to what most people call discipline, but is really discipline of behavior, not discipline of the individual person. So execution reliability index is something I touched on a moment ago. It's about making sure, as an individual or as an organization, the process that is supposed to be being followed is actually being followed step by step. And execution reliability does not replace an organization's current system. What it is the layer that lays on top of the current system to make sure the system is being followed. So any drift of execution, any drift from proper execution is caught early before it reaches the bottom line of an organization, which is the money.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also say that if results are inconsistent, the system is incomplete, my friend. And I'm wondering if we can expand on that line of thinking, and tell me why you think most organizations rely on what I call the instant coffee sort of gratification system, where they want the results without working on the system. So tell me about how we maximize results as an organization, my friend.
Well, one of the main reasons organizations want to get the quick thing instead of putting the time in to make it work is because organizations have a lot of red tape, a lot of bureaucracy, depending on how many people and how many layers of decision making exist. Another reason is organizations, just like human beings, when there is no clarity in terms of doing what is going to lead to what, then people tend to drag their feet because they're not quite sure how and when a certain result is going to be produced. And when people are unsure, they don't go and get answers to clear up their lack of clarity. What they do is a whole bunch of nothing. They do nothing. They stall and they delay. And before you know it, the problem is not even looked at as urgent anymore. So the biggest thing for organizations is they need someone who owns the execution that happens in the organization. That's usually the operator of the business, which is sometimes also the owner, but sometimes it is not. That person needs to make sure that they know how execution is happening, also be able to identify immediately and clearly where execution is lagging, and they need an enforcement layer that allows them to fix that lagging execution. That solves all the problems right there.
Yeah, and, I want to talk to you about, I'm someone who lives with cerebral palsy, Dre, and I'm someone who believes that, making excuses are artificial deterrents to progress. So I try not to make excuses because they're preventing me from making progress. And I'm wondering, for you, you said that when moments of success aren't happening, when you think there should be, we have to take a certain personal level of accountability when that happens. We have to really look at why success hasn't materialized yet. So talk to me about the importance of having moments of success where you, moments of realization where you think success should be happening, but it isn't, and how we can sort of create the patterns or habits to make sure that success is multiplied. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
We call that over here the AWOL effect. So AWOL, which stands for activity without output leverage. That's when you think the success should be there, but success is not quite there yet. And there are several things that could lead to that. It could be a lack of a clear, coherent strategy. Possibly the strategy needs to be held accountable itself because the strategy is not the way currently designed. If implemented, does not produce the desired outcome. Another one is that execution layer. Maybe the strategy is not being executed properly. In my experience, 80% of the time or more, the problem is just a lack of execution, not a poor strategy with a lot of folks. And also when it comes to the output leverage, how can we make sure the strategy is designed that the effort that goes in or the activity that goes in is actually producing a return on investment when it comes to the results? And do these results match up to, or given the amount of effort you had to give, activity you had to give in order to get this result, are you okay with this result? If we were to 10x this and scale up based on what we have here, are you all right with that? The answer is yes, then okay, we can keep working. We don't have the AWOL effect. The answer is no, we have the AWOL effect, and we need to assess where it's happening, why it's happening, and then what exactly to do about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dre, I'm curious to ask you about how you define a competitive advantage in business and in society today, and how do you believe that your time as an athlete has assisted you in corporate boardrooms today, buddy?
Well, competitive advantage is something that you can do or that you have access to that your opponents either cannot do or can't do as well or effectively as you, and or they just don't have access to it. So for example, there are big companies out there, let's say Amazon. They have a competitive advantage over me, for example, because they have more money to spend on ads than I do. So Amazon can probably get more people to see their stuff than I can get people to see my stuff. No matter how much money I spend on ads, Amazon has a little bit more. That's a competitive advantage. Another competitive advantage can be, an example of a competitive advantage is your ability to do something that other people simply cannot do. So Coca-Cola, for example, has a patent on the formula for making Coca-Cola, the actual soda. Nobody else has access to that patent. Therefore, they cannot make Coca-Cola the same way because they don't have access to the patent. So that patent creates what we call a moat in business, and nobody can get to it simply because it's protected. Nobody else can do that. So Coke makes the best Coca-Cola soda, at least according to them. So these are examples of competitive advantages. And what was the other part of the question? I forgot it.
Yeah, just how your time as an athlete has helped you succeed in corporate boardrooms, buddy.
Okay. So first of all, as an athlete, we, as I mentioned earlier, we're clear on the outcome. What exactly are we trying to achieve here? And that's the same thing that I bring into any boardroom, anytime I'm dealing with a business, I bring that same thing into the conversation. What exactly are we looking to achieve here, and what's going to make sure that this is being done right? What's the outcome? And then the second question is, what's the problem? What's getting in the way here? Because I wouldn't be in the room if they didn't think there was a problem, if everything was going smooth. So I find out what exactly the problem is. Once I'm clear what the outcome is supposed to be, and then we start deconstructing from there. That's how we rebuild the strategy. And then the execution is, who owns this part of it? Who owns this part? Who owns this part? And then let's make sure the execution is happening properly. So the same analytical process that I've been going through in the questions that you're asking me here today is the exact same thing that I would do if I'm sitting in a boardroom with a business team.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dre, what is your perspective on mindset and mental toughness? For me, I'll use myself as an example. Dre, throughout the course of my life, I've gone under the knife a total of 7 times as a result of my disability. And when I graduated college, I was rejected 10 times from news directors who wouldn't hire me as a sports reporter because they viewed my disability as a liability. So what I did was I turned my story into my mission, and now I get paid to speak to organizations about amplifying the hiring of folks with disabilities. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on mindset and mental toughness, how it relates to your own personal story, and what do you think the modern employer has to know about mindset and mental toughness?
Excellent question. And I appreciate you sharing that piece of your story. So, for the business owner these days, again, I told you here, Kevin, I'm an absolutist when it comes to producing results. This is a performance and results based business. So, the organizations, leaders in organizations usually, and you probably know this through your own work, is that a lot of organizations are open to the concept of mindset. They're open to somebody coming in and giving a motivational or inspirational speech, whatever you want to call it. You've probably done a ton of them yourself. I've done a ton of them myself. The thing is that motivation or inspiration does not always last. People will have forgotten what you said within about 72 hours, 98% of what you said within 72 hours. So the organizations, they want the mindset piece, and what they really want and then what they go get are two different things. What they usually want is to change the mindsets of the people on their team, get them more motivated, inspired, disciplined, mentally tough, whatever you fill in the blank, whatever they're looking for. What they go get is a temporary change in mindset, but not a permanent change in mindset. And a permanent change in mindset requires more than just one speech on one day at a conference. They need a long-term solution. And what I do, Kevin, and what I would say here on the show is that responsibility goes to the person who is doing the speech, to let the business owner say, hey, Mr. Business Owner, I'm happy to come in and give that speech that you want me to give, but I want you to understand that if you want this to be a permanent change for your team, you're going to need more than just a speech. So here we have this, we have this, we have this, different ways that we can make this a long-term implementation, not just a short-term shot in the arm, so to speak, to the people in your organization. As far as the other piece of what you said, is that you said a lot of organizations turned you down because they looked at your disability as a liability. And that's why I mentioned at the top of this answer, I'm an absolutist on results. So if there is a person out there with a disability, but that disability is not a liability when it comes to producing results, it is the responsibility of the organization to ask themselves, okay, not does this person have a disability? Because that's not the question. The question is, can this person, whether they have a disability or not, help us achieve the outcome? If the answer is yes, then we need to take a hard look at this person. If the answer is no, then we wouldn't take a look at them whether they were disabled or not. This is again a results-based game.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dre, I live my life through the saying that we make time for the things that we prioritize. And I talk to leaders all the time about maximizing their potential and looking within themselves to prioritize what's important to them, because the word potential within organizations means something different for every organization you walk into. So what do you think are core principles or beliefs that organizations should have when they explore the concept of maximizing potential?
Well, number one, what's the goal? So we always start with the same question. What is the goal? What are we looking to achieve? Because potential is about what we could do with regards to with what? So with regards to what? For a sports team, is with regards to winning the championship. For a business, it might be serving our clients at the highest level. Another business may say making as much money as possible. Another business may say we're going to expand. We want to 10x the size of our teams over the next year or two. So we need to get clear on what is the goal, because we can't discuss potential until we talk about potential of or for what. That's the first thing. Then when it comes to building, what was the rest of the question there? And make sure I'm answering it.
Yeah, I just want to get your perspective on the whole idea of maximizing potential and how different organizations can set standards to make sure that they can maximize potential.
Okay, so the other piece then would be, now that we're clear on what potential we want to maximize, the next question is, do we have the resources, that is between people, capital, knowledge, skills, systems, processes, etc., training, do we have the resources in place to actually achieve this outcome? Usually, if a company's talking about maximizing on their potential, usually the answer is no. Right now, we don't have it all. We don't have the system in place for that. We don't have enough people. We don't have enough processes. We don't have enough products. We don't have the right prices in order to achieve this outcome. That's okay. That doesn't mean they're doing something wrong. It means now we have a target. Now we know what we want to aim at. We see where we're at. We see the delta between where we currently stand and where we want to go. Now, the next question is, how do we close that delta? And how long is it going to take to close that delta? What are our expectations? So this is not something they can do tomorrow. It's okay, over time, we make these sales, we hit these numbers. Okay, now we can add this many people to our team. We can raise our prices this much if we start selling to these people instead of those people. These are the things that we need to do with our teams. In order for our teams to be capable of hitting these numbers, we have to give them the enrichment, the skills, the professional development so that they can do it. We have to give them the product knowledge. They have to understand the problems of the prospects. We got to make sure we're investing in lead generation so that they have people to call on. So these are all the things that an organization does in their business planning. Here's what we need in order to move towards this potential that we've identified. These are all the things we need to do and the gaps that we need to close between our current state and our future state. And it's the leadership's job to every day make sure they're doing things that are working towards closing that gap, up to and including serving their teams in such a way that the teams are empowered to do what's necessary to move the organization forward.
Yeah, and I've got 3 questions left for you. The first of those 3 questions is this, my friend. I'm curious, as a Black entrepreneur yourself, looking at the societal disconnect that currently exists in America today, how do you think Black entrepreneurs specifically can rise above the noise and really develop their own sense of prosperity? And where do you still see the societal bottlenecks for Black entrepreneurs to be successful, my friend?
Kevin, I'll preface this answer by reminding you that I'm an athlete, and everybody in this audience that I'm an athlete. And in the sports world, you're judged by the scoreboard, not by your skin tone. And my answer to your question is a Black entrepreneur needs to do the same thing that a white or Asian or Latin entrepreneur needs to do, which is identify who your market is, ask yourself how do they want to be served at the highest possible level, and then you go out there and serve them. If you serve them, which is going on the scoreboard, then the scoreboard is going to reflect that. And if a Black entrepreneur is seeing themselves as being Black as some type of drawback or something that's getting into a liability, word that you used earlier, to doing what you need to do, then I would suggest we go to another thing we discussed here, which is mindset, and clear your mind of that and focus on producing results. Because in the business world, just like in the sports world, if you can help prospects, clients, or an organization produce a result, they won't care about the color of your skin. Because one thing that I've always told people, Kevin, is that we have Black and we have white, but gold and green are the 2 colors that I focus on. Gold is the color of the metal when you come in first place, and green is the color of money when you produce business results. So that's what you need to focus on.
Yeah, from a societal perspective, though, how do you think we can bridge societal divides, whether they're in business or whether they're in life, my friend? How do you think we can get to a place of understanding, compromise, and start bridging some of the societal divides that we experience today?
Well, I think those divides will always exist, and I think that's not a problem to be solved. I don't think it's a bug, Kevin. I think it's a feature. It's a feature because human beings are different. Even if there were just Black people or just white people, not everybody's the same. We're not all the same just because we're the same color. We don't have the same ideas, opinions, beliefs. We don't do things the exact same way. We don't solve problems the same way. And that difference is what makes for diversity. And sometimes that diversity is going to lead to conflict. But the ability to deal with conflict, navigate conflict, and solve conflict is actually what makes a person valuable. It's not the fact that there are no conflicts and that there are no problems, because if that didn't exist, entrepreneurs like us wouldn't be necessary. What makes us valuable is the fact that there are conflicts and that some of us can navigate, some of us can negotiate and solve, and other people cannot. And value is created through scarcity, not through abundance.
Yeah, Andrea, I'm interested to end our conversation by asking you this. You know, at the height of your athletic career, I'm wondering when you realized the peak of your performance had been met athletically, and how that helped you transition to the next chapter of your life, and then ultimately, how do you want your personal and professional legacy to be defined, my friend?
Well, the peak of my athleticism, you probably don't know it till you're past it. So that's the one thing I'll tell you. I knew what the peak of my athleticism was when it was over. And I can look back and say, yeah, around that time, usually for an athlete, that's usually in the late 20s and the early 30s. So somewhere between ages 27 to about 32 is because that's when you've been in the sport long enough to build up your body. but at the same time, you still have enough youthful athleticism to do everything before it starts to slowly taper off. The good thing, though, as you get older, is that your knowledge of the game and your instincts of the game get sharper and sharper as you keep playing. The more you play, the more you accumulate. So then you start compensating for what you are losing athletically with what you can do with your mind. So this is what players do as they get older, and then eventually you get so old as far as your physical ability that you can't do it anymore, and that's why they call sports a young man's or a young woman's game. As far as the answer to your question there, you're saying what do I want my legacy to be?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, what I want my legacy to be is a person who inspired and moved other people to get clear on their principles, to get clear on set a standard for themselves, go out there and execute on it, and actually produce results for themselves. So while they may like my message and enjoy the things that I say, the purpose of my message is not for you, not you, Kevin, but the listeners, not for you to listen and watch me, but to listen to and watch me, and then you go do something so that there's an audience of people listening to and watching you in the future. And I'll be happy taking just a tiny, small piece of credit for that.
Well, paying it forward comes in many different forms, doesn't it?
That's right. That's right. Absolutely.
Absolutely, my friend. Well, tell me, my friend, if people want to get connected with work on your game and yourself personally, what's the best way they can do that?
They can find me on any social media platform. I'm on all of them. Just look up my name, Dre Baldwin. I'm very easy to find. All my profiles are public. And if they want to connect with me directly for our execution reliability, which is our organizational program, or the power presence, which is our individual program, just go to workonyourgame.com. That's workonyourgame.com.
Well, fabulous, my friend. Well, this was an engaging and thought-provoking way to end my day, talking about leadership, execution, strategy, and everything in between, my friend. I really respect and honor the work that you've done in the field of entrepreneurship and helping organizations build up their own sense of prosperity. It was a real pleasure to get to know you, spend a couple of minutes and engage in conversation. Your time and efforts on my behalf are most appreciated, my friend, and I want to thank you for being here this afternoon.
Well, Kevin, I appreciate you giving me the time. I appreciate you sharing your platform, and also for the excellent questions here. I hope your audience got a lot of value out of this.